I'm 60 years old and fell for a gay love scam. Love is a powerful thing. It gives hope, fills emptiness, and brings meaning to life. But what happens when that love is nothing more than a carefully crafted illusion? When the person you trust the most turns out to be a lie? This is the story of Thomas, a 60-year-old man who thought he had finally found love online. After years of loneliness, he believed he had met the perfect man, someone who saw him for who he was. But on the day of their long-awaited meeting, the truth shattered him. Get ready for an intense, emotional story of trust, hope, and ultimate betrayal. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications. Your support helps us bring you more powerful stories like this one. I was never good at relationships. Life passed by too fast. Work, responsibilities, the struggle to accept myself. By the time I looked up, my youth was gone. And with it, my chances at love. At 60, I thought romance was something that no longer belonged to me. A lonely, aging man. Who would want me now? And then he appeared. His name was Lucas. 25 years old. Young, handsome, full of life. And for some reason, he was interested in me. We met on an app. At first, I thought it was a mistake. A man like him could never be interested in someone like me. But he insisted. He told me age didn't matter, that he liked mature men, deep conversations, real love. And I believed him. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. We talked every day. For the first time in years, I felt alive. Lucas called me my love. He said he loved my voice when we talked on the phone. He sent pictures, videos, sweet messages. I spent hours staring at my screen, smiling like a teenager in love. And when he started telling me about his financial struggles, I didn't hesitate. It was normal to help the person you love, right? He needed money for rent. Then his car broke down. A family emergency. Each request came with a promise. Once we meet, I'll make it up to you. I sent him money without thinking. Every transfer felt like an act of love. Then, one day, he sent a message that made my heart race. Let's meet. After a year of talking, he finally wanted to see me in person. I didn't think twice. Yes. I booked a hotel, bought my plane ticket, planned every detail. This was the moment I had been waiting for. But I had no idea what was really waiting for me. The night before my flight, I barely slept. My heart raced with anticipation, my thoughts filled with everything that could happen. Tomorrow, I would finally meet Lucas. After months of conversations, calls, and dreams, the moment had arrived. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of my shirt, examining every wrinkle on my face, every sign of age that time had gifted me. Would he still find me attractive in person? He always said he loved older men, that my experience and wisdom were what drew him in. He told me age was just a number, that I was exactly what he had been looking for. I clung to those words, let them fill me with courage. This was love, and love was worth every risk. The morning light filtered through my window as I zipped up my suitcase, checking my phone over and over again. Lucas had messaged me. "Can't wait to see you, babe. Travel safe." My heart swelled with warmth. He was waiting for me. I had imagined this moment so many times, walking into the cafe, seeing his face light up, the embrace, the first real touch after all this time. It would be magical. At the airport, I felt the familiar mix of nerves and excitement. People bustled around me, but I was lost in my own world, envisioning our meeting, picturing how my life was about to change. As I boarded the plane, I closed my eyes and saw it all so clearly. Lucas's smile, his arms around me, the way he would finally whisper my name in person. The flight felt both endless and too quick at the same time. My hands trembled slightly as I grabbed my suitcase from the overhead bin. I stepped off the plane and inhaled deeply. I was here. The city felt alive. humming with the energy of something new, something promising. I hailed a taxi, gave the address Lucas had sent me, and watched as the buildings blurred past. This was it. Every mile brought me closer to him. The cafe was small, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city, just as he had described. "I want our first moment together to be intimate. Just us," he had said. It was perfect. I stepped inside, scanning the room, my pulse hammering against my ribs. My eyes searched every face, waiting to find the one I had memorized from pictures. But he wasn't there. I checked my phone. No new messages. Maybe he was running late. I took a seat, ordered a coffee, and waited. Minutes stretched into an hour. My fingers hovered over my phone, typing, deleting, typing again. Finally, I sent a message. "I'm here." No response. Another half hour passed. My coffee had gone cold. The hopeful glow inside me began to flicker. I checked my phone again. The message had been delivered, but not read. My stomach tightened. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Still nothing. A sick feeling began to spread through my chest. This wasn't right. I had spoken to Lucas just this morning. He had told me he couldn't wait to see me. Where was he? I refreshed our chat. Still no response. I scrolled through our messages, rereading his words, as if searching for a clue, an answer. My hands felt cold. Then something changed. His profile picture disappeared. I blinked, my breath catching in my throat. I tapped his name. "User not found." My stomach dropped. I tried to call him again, my fingers shaking as I dialed, but the number was no longer in service. I sat there, frozen, my heart hammering in my chest. I opened our conversations, looking at every sweet message, every promise, every declaration of love. And then, like an avalanche, it hit me. It had all been a lie. The money, the messages, the affection. It had never been real. I wasn't meeting the love of my life. I had been scammed. My vision blurred as I stared at the empty screen, my hands gripping the phone so tightly they ached. How had I let this happen? How had I believed it? I had given him everything. My time, my trust, my heart. And in return, he had given me nothing but an illusion. People around me laughed, chatted, sipped their drinks, living their lives as if the world hadn't just collapsed around me. I felt small, invisible, foolish. I had traveled across the country for someone who didn't exist. And now, I was completely alone. I don't know how long I sat there. The world around me moved on, but I was frozen, staring at my phone like it could somehow change what had just happened. People passed by. Conversations hummed in the background. Laughter filled the air. But inside me, there was only silence. A gaping, hollow silence. The kind that comes when something inside you breaks. I scrolled through our messages again, as if rereading them would somehow make them real. Every "I love you," every promise, every whispered dream of a future together, it was all right there, a digital record of my own foolishness. But now, the name at the top of the screen was blank. No profile picture, no online status, nothing. A waiter came by, his polite smile faltering when he saw my face. "Sir, do you need anything?" I shook my head. My voice wouldn't come. I forced myself to put my phone down, my fingers gripping the edge of the table to keep my hands from shaking. I needed to think. I needed to breathe. The truth was unbearable. Lucas wasn't real, or at least, not the version of him I had fallen in love with. He was a ghost, a carefully constructed lie, designed to make me trust, to make me believe, and I had believed with everything I had. The realization cut deeper than I could have imagined. It wasn't just about the money, though I knew I had lost a fortune. It was about something much worse. He had stolen my hope. He had given me something I thought I'd never have again, the feeling of being wanted. And now, that feeling had been replaced with nothing but shame. I couldn't stay there any longer. I grabbed my bag, tossed some money onto the table, and walked out of the cafe, my legs unsteady beneath me. The city felt different now, colder, unfamiliar. The warmth I had imagined, the excitement I had built up inside me for months, had all turned to dust. I wandered the streets without direction, replaying everything in my mind. Every red flag I had ignored. Every moment I had convinced myself that love like this was possible for someone like me. I had been so desperate to believe that I mattered, that someone saw me, wanted me, and that desperation had made me blind. I checked my bank account again, even though I already knew the answer. The money was gone. Every last transfer, every loan, every bit of generosity I had given to him, all vanished into thin air. I thought about going to the police. Maybe they could track him. Maybe they could find the person behind the screen. But then what? Would it change anything? Would it undo the way I felt, the way my heart had been shattered? I found myself at the edge of a park, sitting on an empty bench. The sky had darkened, the air crisp with the approaching evening. People passed by in pairs, in groups. I watched them, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. I had spent so much time hoping for a future that would never come. And now, I had to face the truth. I had nothing left. No love, no money, no one waiting for me at the end of the day. I covered my face with my hands, swallowing the lump in my throat. I wanted to cry, but even that felt pointless. Tears wouldn't change the past. The only thing left to do was go home. Alone. I boarded the plane back home in a daze, my body moving on autopilot. The seatbelt felt too tight across my lap, the hum of the engines too loud, the air around me too thick. Everything felt wrong. This trip was supposed to change my life, and in a way, it had. Just not how I expected. I stared out of the small window, watching the city shrink beneath me as the plane ascended into the night sky. Somewhere down there, Lucas, or whoever he really was spending the money I had sent him. Maybe he was laughing. Maybe he had already moved on to his next victim. Maybe he hadn't thought about me at all. I had been nothing more than a transaction, a name on a screen, a foolish old man desperate for love. The realization sat like a weight in my chest, heavy and unbearable. My hands gripped the armrests, my nails digging into the fabric. How could I have let this happen? I had always been careful, always been skeptical of things that seemed too good to be true. But I had wanted to believe. That was my mistake. A flight attendant stopped beside me, her voice soft. "Sir, would you like something to drink?" I barely registered her words before shaking my head. "No, thank you." My voice sounded hollow, like it didn't belong to me. She offered a polite smile before moving on, and I exhaled slowly, leaning back against the seat. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't stop replaying everything. The messages, the promises, the excitement I had felt each time my phone lit up with his name. "You make me so happy, babe. I can't wait to be in your arms. You're the love of my life." Lies, all of it. I closed my eyes, but all I saw was the cafe where I had waited for him, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold. The slow, painful realization that I had been scammed, that I had been nothing but a joke to him. Shame burned in my chest. I was smarter than this, or at least I thought I was. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was knowing that I had opened my heart to someone who had never truly existed, that the love I had felt wasn't real, that I had spent months falling for a fantasy. The plane landed hours later, but I barely noticed the descent. I walked through the airport like a ghost, moving through the motions without feeling anything. I should have been angry. I should have been ready to fight, to track him down, to demand justice. But all I felt was empty. I took a taxi home, watching the city lights blur past me. The streets felt unfamiliar, even though I had lived here for years. Maybe because when I left, I had been one person. And now, I was someone else. Someone broken. Unlocking my apartment door, I stepped inside, the silence greeting me like an old friend. Everything was exactly as I had left it, but it felt different. Colder. Lonelier. I dropped my bag by the door, sat on the couch, and stared at the blank TV screen in front of me. The loneliness pressed in, heavier than before. Because now it wasn't just solitude. It was humiliation. I picked up my phone, scrolling through my messages one last time. The entire conversation thread with Lucas was still there, untouched, as if he hadn't just disappeared from my life like smoke. I hovered over the screen for a long time before finally pressing delete. But even as the messages vanished, the pain remained. Because some things can't be erased. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog. Everything was muted, distant, as if the world had lost its color. I went through the motions of my routine, waking up, making coffee, staring at the same four walls, but I wasn't really there. My body was moving, but my mind was stuck somewhere else. Somewhere in the past, where love had felt possible, where Lucas had been real. I avoided my phone. The thought of opening it, of scrolling through the empty inbox where his messages used to be, was unbearable. He was gone, and yet he was everywhere. In the silence of my apartment, in the spaces between moments when I forgot and then remembered all over again. In the way I caught myself reaching for my phone, only to stop halfway, my chest tightening with shame. I barely ate. Sleep was worse. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the cafe, the cold coffee, the empty seat across from me. The realization that I had been played. The humiliation sat like a stone in my stomach, impossible to digest. I should have known better. That thought haunted me, circled in my head like a vulture. How could I have been so blind, so naive? The answer was painful. Because I had wanted to believe. I had wanted so desperately for it to be true that I ignored every warning sign, every hesitation, every little voice in the back of my mind whispering that love doesn't come this easy. Not for someone like me. One evening, I forced myself to go outside. Sitting in my apartment, drowning in regret, wasn't helping. The air was cool, the streets alive with people. I watched couples walking hand in hand, laughter spilling from cafes and restaurants. It felt like another world, one I had tried to step into, only to be shoved back out. I wandered without direction, lost in my thoughts. At some point, I found myself near a park bench and sat down, rubbing my hands together as the night settled around me. I felt old, not just in my body, but in my heart. A young couple passed by, holding each other close, their voices soft, their smiles effortless. My chest ached. That was all I had wanted. Not the money, not the fantasies. Just that. The feeling of being seen, of being loved, of mattering to someone. I thought about calling a friend, but the shame held me back. How could I explain this? How could I tell someone that I, a grown man, 60 years old, had fallen for something so obvious? Who would understand? The worst part was knowing that he was out there somewhere, doing this to someone else. Another man, maybe another lonely soul looking for love, another victim who would sit in a cafe, heart pounding with excitement, only to leave hours later feeling empty and humiliated. I should have been angry, but all I felt was tired. I closed my eyes, letting the sounds of the city wash over me. I had been looking for something: hope, love, a second chance at happiness. Instead, I had found a lesson I never wanted to learn. Love hadn't betrayed me. I had betrayed myself. I stayed there on that bench, unmoving as the world continued on around me. People laughing, cars honking, life moving forward. But for me, there was nowhere left to go. Because sometimes, there is no happy ending. I stopped checking my phone altogether. The silence of my apartment became a refuge, a place where I could avoid the truth pressing against my chest. Days blurred together. I went through the motions, waking up, drinking coffee, staring at the window as the world moved on without me. But inside, I felt stuck. The shame was the hardest part. It clung to me, whispered in my ear every time I dared to think of something else. How could I have been so foolish? How could I, a man of 60, a man who had lived through so much, fallen for such an obvious lie? The weight of my own gullibility crushed me. I had always prided myself on being careful, on not taking unnecessary risks. And yet, I had handed my heart to a ghost. Some days, I tried to convince myself that it wasn't all fake, that maybe, at some point, Lucas had cared, even if just a little. But those thoughts only made it worse because they kept me trapped in what-ifs. What if he had meant some of it? What if he had struggled with the decision to betray me? What if, in some alternate version of this story, we had actually met, and things had been real? But there was no alternate version. There was only the truth, and it was unforgiving. He had never loved me. He had never even existed the way I thought he did. I finally forced myself to check my bank account. The numbers stared back at me, the damage worse than I had let myself believe. Every transfer, every gift, every little thing he had convinced me was for our future. It was all gone. Thousands of dollars. Money I had worked for. Money that should have been for my own future. I had spent my whole life saving, and in a matter of months, I had given it all away for a lie. I should have called the bank. I should have called the police. Maybe there was still something to be done. But what was the point? Would they track him down? Would they find the man behind the screen? Or would they just shake their heads, file a report, and move on, knowing there was nothing they could do? I thought about reporting it, but the idea of explaining everything, of reliving it, of admitting to a stranger what had happened, was unbearable. The shame was too much. And even if they could do something, what would it change? The money was gone. The love I thought I had wasn't real. Nothing could bring it back. I turned my phone off. The days stretched into weeks. I stopped leaving the house unless absolutely necessary. My reflection in the mirror became a stranger, someone tired, someone older than I remembered. I tried to read, to watch TV, to distract myself. Nothing worked, because everything reminded me of him. Every love story felt like mockery. Every happy ending felt like proof that I had been a fool for believing I could have one. One evening, I found myself back at the park, sitting on the same bench where I had first realized the depth of my loneliness. The world around me was the same, but I was not. People walked past me, laughing, holding hands, their lives untouched by what had happened to me. I envied them, not for their love, but for their ignorance. They hadn't learned this particular heartbreak. They still had hope. A part of me wished I could turn back time, erase it all, go back to before I had ever met Lucas, before I had known what it was like to feel wanted again. But I couldn't. There was no going back. I sat there as the sky darkened, my hands folded in my lap. I wasn't sure how long I stayed, but eventually I stood up and walked home, feeling the same emptiness I had carried for weeks. Because some wounds don't heal, some betrayals change you forever, and some stories don't have a happy ending.